Hello, everyone. My name is Yuan Hao, and our topic is social presence in online learning environment. And the focus of our presentation is to address how social media is built through guided discussion, visible thinking, and organized academic exchange. For my section, I focused on VoiceThread, discussion boards, and Google Docs / Google Slide comments. These tools are not flashy platforms, but critical for education as they cultivate a learning space where it bridges social presence and broader participation within a learning space. Students feel that they are actually seen, heard, and responded to in a learning space and that their ideas have an impact. Furthermore, these tools I am discussing show how social presence can emerge through structure and visible interaction. So, the first platform I want to explore is VoiceThread. This is something I am learning how to use this semester actually and feels the most personal to me because I have been using VoiceThread every week in my Masters of Education language class with Dr. Meredith. And in that course, a lot of learning happens through asynchronous weekly discussions on VoiceThread. So we would read theory heavy material, and then instead of only writing short text responses like I did for my undergrad, we would record our thoughts and respond to classmates through audio or video. What makes VoiceThread particularly powerful is that it changes discussion from something robotic into more human. For that class, we have to do 3 seminars as seminar leaders as well. And I always have at least 3 discussion questions at the end of my presentation for my classmates to respond to. When I hear a classmate responding to my questions, I am not just seeing their ideas as text on a screen. I hear their voice, their pacing, their hesitation, and their emphasis. I am able to tell if they are building on someone else's point as well. So in my language class, this mattered a lot because most of the readings were very theoretical. When we were discussing ideas revolving around reading processes, vocabulary, comprehension, or distinctions between aesthetic and efferent reading, VoiceThread made it easier to hear how different classmates were interpreting the same concepts but coming from different backgrounds of interpretation. And this connects to Garrison's work on social presence, because social presence is about people being able to present themselves as real participants within the inquiry process. This is why I like VoiceThread. It preserves people's identities and speech to make the social discourse purposeful, while at the same time preserving academic discussion. Another important part of VoiceThread is the fact that it is asynchronous, like I've talked about. I am able to work at my own pace, and engage more deeply with readers and classmates' ideas. So the second tool I want to talk about is discussion boards and posts. As a graduate of English at University of Toronto and a Bachelor of Education student at Nipissing University, I often use discussion boards on Blackboard to facilitate further critical thinking. Although they seem basic and boring, there is an important aspect of it as it reveals structure matters for social presence. A discussion board can feel performative at times, but it carries a meaningful academic exchange. What discussion boards do well, like VoiceThread, is that it gives students time to think before they respond. And this is especially important from an inclusivity and equity perspective for students that are less socially inclined to talk in live conversation. Students can contribute in a meaningful way and revisit the prompt, which I find to be very beneficial, especially during my undergrad years. I have also noticed that during my graduate level courses, discussion boards are implemented less, but it still preserves intellectual presence through responses building on one another to form a thread of thinking. And most of the time, though, people just respond once or twice and leave. Thus, the tool created isolated posting mostly, and social presence has to be supported by the design of the task and the quality of the prompts. Finally, I want to talk about Google Docs and Google Slide comments. This one connects well with my experience in my Arts Integrated Research class for my Master of Education with Dr. Pauline Samishima. So, in that course, shared documents and slides have been a big part of how group work happens. We have to build presentations every week, organize readings, draft slides, and plan tasks. I also was able to use AI for a lot of the rendering process, where it generated images that represented my metaphorical interpretations of the readings at hand. I was in a pod of four people, and each of them had to respond to my slides kind of like discussion boards. Google Docs and Google Slide comments became more than just editing tools in that way, and they became learning spaces where thinking was made visible. My professor would also interject in between comments to cultivate further discussion. And this connects to Wilson's work on Google Docs and collaborative writing because shared spaces allowed me and other colleagues to co construct meaning instead of submitting just individual work. This has been relevant in my arts integrated research class, where the work of everyone are interpretive and comments and suggestions showed where people agreed and where people needed more clarity. At the same time, this tool also taught me something important. Visibility does not automatically mean presence. In group work, a shared doc can make thinking visible, but social presence only develops when group members actually respond to one another. My biggest takeaway from these three tools are that social presence in online learning is built when contributions are not only posted, but taken up by others. VoiceThread does this exemplarily well with voice, tone, and replayable responses, while discussion boards do this through layered reflection. And finally, Google Docs and Slides do this through visible revision and comments. So, to conclude, these platforms allow that online learning becomes socially meaningful once students can negotiate meaning and see their ideas have entered a shared space where they can influence other people's thinking to cultivate a higher understanding or response. Thank you for listening to my part.
Alrighty, so I'm Maya, and the focus of my section is on how visual and spatial design makes participation visible in online learning spaces. When we think about social presence, we often focus on interaction or communication, but this section looks at something slightly different, how we can actually see participation as it's happening. This idea of visibility is really important, especially in an online environment where we don't have the same physical cues as we do in a physical classroom, like eye contact or body language, for example. Without these cues, participation can feel less obvious or even invisible at times. So, I'll be focusing on three tools that we've seen across our online learning: Jamboard, Miro, and Mentimeter. And I'll be explaining how each of these platforms shows participation in a visual way rather than just through text and speech. Jamboard is probably the simplest of the three, but that's actually what makes it so powerful. When students add sticky notes to a shared board, their contributions appear instantly. And as more students participate, the board will literally fill up in real time. This means that participation becomes immediately visible and shared, rather than something that is hidden in a separate response or through the maze of discussion threads. Students can see not only their own ideas, but also that others are contributing alongside them, which creates a stronger sense of being part of a group activity rather than them just working something out on their own. Research by Kagler and colleagues on remote collaboration shows that this kind of visibility, specifically being able to see others work in real time, helps create a stronger sense of awareness and engagement within the group. So it's not just about contributing, but also about recognizing that others are contributing too. Color also happens to play an important role here. Different sticky note colors can represent different students or ideas, and even without reading the Jamboard completely, you can visually recognize that there are multiple voices present. This makes participation not only visible, but also easily interpretable at a glance. This is especially important in an online environment where fewer visual cues can make collaboration harder. Rand and colleagues show that when visual cues are limited, interaction and information sharing can decrease. So tools like Jamboard help compensate for that by making participation visible in other ways, almost like replacing those missing social signals. So overall, Jamboard supports social presence through immediacy, simplicity, and clear visual markers of participation. Unlike Jamboard, Miro doesn't just show individual contributions. It shows how ideas can be connected. Students can group ideas, draw links between them, and organize information spatially. For instance, clustering similar ideas together can reveal patterns in thinking, while arrows or lines can show relationships between concepts and ideas. This allows students to move beyond just sharing their ideas and start working with each other's. Yang and colleagues' research on collaborative mind mapping shows that when arranging ideas in a shared visual space, it helps learners to externalize their thinking and build connections between varying concepts. In other words, students are not just thinking individually, but they're making their thinking visible so that others are able to interact with it. This kind of spatial organization supports what researchers call sense-making, where learners can use space to structure and understand information more effectively. The layout itself becomes meaningful, not just the content. Because of this, participation in Miro is not just about contributing a single response, but also about shaping and developing ideas collectively over time. Here, students can move, edit, and connect ideas, which creates a more dynamic and collaborative process. So participation is not just visible as isolated responses, but as part of a larger system of collective thinking, where meaning is built through relationships between ideas. Finally, Mentimeter shifts the focus from individual contributions to the collective voice of the group. When students respond to polls or prompts, their answers are instantly turned into visual outputs like word clouds or charts. This allows students to immediately see patterns, trends, and dominant ideas across the classroom. Instead of focusing on who said what, the platform shows how individual inputs combine into a shared perspective. This changes how participation is experienced because students are not just contributors in this sense, they're part of a larger whole. Gisbert and colleagues' research on online learning environments suggests that social presence is strengthened when learners feel connected to a group and can see themselves as part of a shared interactive space. Mentimeter supports this by making group responses visible in real time, helping students recognize how their inputs fit within the group. This is especially important in an online setting where lack of shared context or visible interaction can reduce learners' sense of connection and participation. Without that sense of connection, students may feel isolated or disengaged. So, by visualizing the group as a whole, Mentimeter reinforces that sense of belonging and helps students see that their contribution matters as part of a collective outcome and not just as an individual response. So, overall, one key idea connects all three tools. Social presence is not just about interaction, it's also about visibility. When students can see participation happening, whether it's through sticky notes or structured idea maps or even the live data visualizations of polls, they become more aware of others and more aware of their role within the group. These tools also lower the barrier to participation. For example, Jamboard allows for quick low-pressure responses, where Miro allows for different ways of contributing, like organizing or connecting ideas. And Mentimeter allows anonymous input, which can encourage more honest participation. Because of all of these things, more students are able to engage, including those who might be quieter or less comfortable speaking in traditional settings. Ultimately, these visual and collaborative spaces turn participation into something that's not hidden or individual, but into something that's collective and visible and constantly evolving over time.
Hi everyone. I'm going to focus on how social presence develops when students respond, reflect, and give feedback to one another, using three tools: Padlet, Twitter, and Loom. First, to ground this, social presence refers to the extent to which students feel that others are real and engaged in a learning environment. It develops through interaction, visibility, and participation, especially when students actively respond to one another. Across all three tools, connection is not passive. It is built through ongoing peer exchange. Starting with Padlet, this platform clearly shows how social presence develops through structured peer feedback and collaborative learning. In RAF 2024, it describes a shift from teacher-centered instruction to co-constructed learning, where students actively engage with each other's ideas. This is where Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, or ZPD, becomes especially important. The ZPD refers to the space between what a learner can do independently and what they can do with support from others. On Padlet, that support comes directly from peers. When students read a classmate's post that introduces a slightly more advanced idea and then respond by extending, questioning, or refining it, they are effectively working with their ZPD. So, for example, a student might initially misunderstand a concept, but after reading peer responses and engaging in discussion, they adjust their thinking. That interaction, reading, reflecting, and responding, is not just participation. It is learning through social mediation. This process also builds feedback literacy, which depends on students comparing their work with others and using that comparison to improve, based on work done by Carlos and Baud, as cited in RAF 2024. Padlet makes this visible and continues, allowing feedback to become a dialogue rather than a one-time comment. Padlet asynchronous structure further strengthens this process because students have time to think before responding. Their contributions tend to be more reflective and developed, which deepens cognitive engagement. At the same time, features like anonymity create psychological safety, making students more comfortable sharing honest feedback and participating openly. So overall, social presence on Padlet is built through reflection, peer scaffolding, and trust. Moving to Twitter, or class hashtags, the interaction becomes faster and more networked. Twitter allows students to engage in microblogging, where ideas are shared quickly and conversations develop through replies and hashtags, based on work completed by Smith 2012. Here, social presence develops through continuous visible interaction. When students reply to each other, like post or extend ideas within a hashtag, they signal attention and validation. These small interactions build a sense of connection and encourage further participation. Research shows that students using Twitter reported increased social comfort and engagement. This suggests that Twitter's strength lies not in content retention, but in building community and encouraging participation. Because Twitter is public or semi-public, it also shapes the student voice. This visibility of posts create an authentic audience, which can motivate students to contribute more thoughtfully and consistently. It can also empower quieter students to participate more comfortably. So here, social presence is built through network dialogue and audience awareness. And finally, Loom. Loom adds another layer by incorporating video. With Loom, students create and share asynchronous video responses, which include voice, facial expression, and visual explanation. According to POF 2026, when students create videos to explain concepts, they shift from passive learners to active creators and teachers. This is important because teaching others reinforces understanding and promotes deeper learning. What makes Loom especially effective for social presence is that it includes human cues, tone, expression, and pacing, which make peers feel more real compared to text-based interaction. When students respond to each other's videos, they engage in reciprocal meaning making, where understanding develops through explanation and dialogue. Loom also supports reflection in a deeper way. Because responses are asynchronous, students can plan and refine their explanations before recording. This promotes metacognition, as they have to think about how they learned in order to teach it. Additionally, videos can be replayed, allowing students to revisit and reflect on ideas over time. Across all three tools, asynchronous communication plays a key role. Unlike live discussions, which often prioritize speed, asynchronous environments allow students to pause, process, and respond more thoughtfully. So, to conclude, the main takeaway is that social presence and therefore learning is built through sustained visible and reciprocal interaction. Across all three, when students are given space to respond, reflect, and engage with each other, learning becomes a collaborative, dialogic process grounded in connection.
My part is about building social presence in online learning through immediacy, live interaction, and informal community channels. Social presence is just that feeling of being connected to others online, and it is important to make online learning less lonely and more engaging. As a result, I focus on 4 tools: Zoom breakout rooms, Teams chat, Discord for education, and interaction games like Kahoot. First, synchronous tools help students feel like they belong and interact naturally. Zoom's small breakout rooms make students feel less anxious. For example, they are more willing to talk casually and have unplanned chats. Discord's drop-in voice channels let learners connect like they were in a real study space, making that sense of presence stronger. Second, games and live responsive tools like especially Kahoot get more students to participate. Kahoot's fun setup makes joining in easy way, and it is no pressure to be right and even shy students to join in. Teams chat helps too, since you can participate with quick and simple messages. Third, backup channels are key for building an informal community. Teams chat and Discord are like digital water coolers. Students connect about more than just homework, like study tips or hobbies. These casual chats build trust and make everyone feel like part of a real group. To sum up, immediacy, live interaction, and informal channels with these 4 tools bridge the gap between being a part of and feeling connected. They make online learners feel seen and heard, which is how we build real social presence in virtual classrooms. That's it. Thank you.